Want to introduce ourselves first, and then we'll kind of go through our presentation. But my name is Keith Manich. I have the responsibility over the collision division at ATI. And Drew Bryant is over there to talk as our expert today. And I'm actually Drew's coach as well. So we have a long-standing relationship. So we're probably not going to have a lot of time for questions, but if you really feel you want to ask one, we just have to make sure we're on time. We are under some time constraints this year. So who came here thinking you were going to leave with a magic decoder ring or a, magic wand and you're going to make everything work perfectly in your shop? Because if you did, you're in the wrong place. Okay. We like to go through, it's for me especially, my background is all in compliance and building compliance models for either manufacturing or what we do as remanufacturing. So we're going to talk a lot about how those compliance things will help you to build efficiencies in your store. So I'm going to introduce Drew to you, let him kind of tell you a little bit about himself, but we look at especially when we started, and if you don't mind, I'm going to tell, Drew was doing about $13,000 a week when I first got him as his coach. Now we're up to what now?
80.
80,000 a week. So that tells me that, that tells me that the compliance models do work. And so that's what we're gonna kind of get you there, but it's hard work, it's strategic thinking, it's well-planned processes, it's procedural execution, and that's one thing Drew is very good at, is making sure that his people are following the processes. And then the one thing for Drew that's been amazing is the change in the shop culture. So all of those things combined get you to a point where you go from, a relatively small shop to a mega shop in a short period of time. So Drew began his business in 2011. I'm going to let him walk through all the steps in his process. But the one thing that's really important here is they were dedicated to quality repairs in the shop. That's another thing. Folks say, well, we're trying to go so fast to meet the insurance company's expectations. Stop. We don't work for insurance companies. You work for yourselves. And so we need to look at what do we have to do to go ahead and make sure that we're getting paid and all those kind of things. And I'm going to give you a shameless plug. The new class that we developed to help you work through those insurance issues, we ran the beta test last week, and it was really good.
Phenomenal.
So yeah. I've got a couple of things that we have to do, a little bit of tweaks, and then we'll be rolling that class out for everybody. But I think you all will enjoy it. And I'll just, another shameless plug for Drew. He's ROI of 4.1 million right now, and I think it's even higher than that. So again, the process compliance works real good. So Drew, what was the trigger that motivated you to get into business for yourself?
Sure. So my work history, I started as a dishwasher at Panera Bread, of all places. Very process-rich environment, high school job. I had no idea what, it was just a job, right? Starting from a dishwasher, I kind of climbed the ladder through management to chef super, assistant manager, store general manager. And by the time I was 21, I found myself as a regional training manager for 6 stores in North Florida. So I was totally outclassed. The people, my peers, I was driving monthly across town several hours. I was in Gainesville at the time, several hours to Tampa, and getting there for these meetings. I'm sitting at a round table and have no idea what these guys are even talking about. But just being in the room and absorbing the content, I was learning far more than I realized at the time. The exposure to it, being a young guy, I was go, 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 and ultimately I was burning the candle at both ends, right? It was 70, 80-hour weeks, no exaggeration, just, if anybody's worked in the restaurant industry, you can relate, it's brutal, right? And I was dedicated, so they were grinding me out. Somewhere amongst that time, I always had a passion for cars, but I never really, no disrespect to my father, but he couldn't hang a picture on the wall, let alone change oil in a car. So I enjoyed vehicles. I grew up next to a guy that had a stereo shop, and it kind of exposed me to a little bit of fiberglass and some silicone moldings. And in my spare time, after working my long hours, I began to, that's actually a picture of my porch, apartment porch in Gainesville while my wife was going to school, where I was fiberglassing dashboards or radio templates that would hold iPads, and initially I was selling them on eBay in my spare time. Inevitably, that began to kind of pick up, and that's initially how I kind of stepped into the world of automotive.
So boy, that's a huge difference, but one of the things that Drew and I've always talked about is the compliance model that you have in restaurants is very much like what we want, so that you're following the same processes every day, keeps people from making mistakes, expectations are set, so it works really well, some synergies there. So what led to your decision to open this collision repair center?
So the dashboards that I was selling online, I was selling them faster than I could make them at the time. It was just myself. And I had no idea what to make of it. I was having more fun, just kind of exercising my creativity than I was about the finances of it. But inevitably, that became full-time. And I opened up a small car stereo shop, a little 400 square foot bay by myself, and continued to kind of increase production. While doing so, I got involved in an accident, and not having any exposure to the industry, I just followed the lead of the insurance company, and ultimately my car ended up at a direct repair program or a DRP shop. The experience through that, when I got the vehicle back, something wasn't right, something was off. I reached out to a buddy, they referred me to have the vehicle, have a post-repair inspection performed. We did a post-repair, and it was so bad that the insurance company ultimately had to buy the vehicle back from me. My exposure to that whole that scenario kind of, I don't know, it kindled something in me that said, look, I got to do something more than put iPads in dashboards of cars, right? That clientele, I had more to offer. And ultimately, I set out to basically make a shop, right, that would be the shop that I wish I had had in the experience of getting involved in an accident. Somebody that was looking out for my best interest rather than the insurer. And the research began, right? I started, we hired ATI. Anything that I could get my hands on, all the books between insurance litigation, policy verbiage, what the consumer's rights were underneath of all of that, and really just dove into the world of collision from an analytical perspective.
You've had some articles written about your store lately. Quite impressive, I can say too. But you alluded to the fact that you had 3 specific areas that you were trying to build within your culture. So creating the culture of leadership, how did you do that with your folks?
So it's currently right now, the article that he's referring to, I don't know how many in the room are familiar with Fender Bender, but it's kind of our lead magazine on the collision side. This month, I'm on the cover of Fender Bender. It's the second time inside of a year. And that's a centerfold that they did specifically on Kings of Culture. So we were nationally recognized for having the best culture within our industry for a medium-sized shop. If you are not familiar with it, I would encourage you to look that up. I think that they did a relatively good job of interviewing my staff and getting a firsthand perspective of exactly what their thoughts of our culture is beyond just listening to me. But to explain specifically exactly how we executed that, I'm going to do a quick demonstration to give you guys a visual, and then hopefully I can tie it together. This is exactly what we did to be able to kind of maintain and what I mean by culture of leadership. You guys want to jump up here for me? You stand right here, Zach, just on the end, right here. Is it Mike, Mo? Sorry, right here for me. Right here. Just say, right here. Sorry. Step. Good. Right here. Come on. Stop. And then go down by key. Right there. Awesome. All right, so the biggest thing for culture that I've been able to kind of witness and see the staff to receive, if you're the only one in your store working on your culture or your process, good luck. It's got to be, the entire team has got to be dedicated to it. And this specifically is the exercise that we demonstrate to them and we regularly remind them, and we want to instill confidence that we have these resources together. So if you were to draw a line, if you're taking notes, draw a line on your paper, right? And on the very left-hand side, Zach is going to be pure bliss. This is heaven on earth. You have no problems within your shop whatsoever, pure bliss. Mo is the beginning of conflict, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be peer-to-peer or an issue with amongst, am I making you uncomfortable? I'm sorry, man. It doesn't have to be peer-to-peer. It might just be, conflict within the store, an issue within a lack of process. Maybe something is over processed, right? Maybe a process is dated, and now that you've added 4 or 5 team members, you haven't got the chance to circle back and update whatever that is. So Mo is the beginning of conflict. Todd is going to be, if I start to go red here, right, and we start to get negative, right, Todd is just on the other side of the breaking point, right? Between Todd and Judd, apologies. Between Todd and Judd, this is the danger zone, right? This is disengagement. This is turnover, right? This is where we don't want to be, right? Understand your best process development is going to be right here. Most people stop between Mo and Zach. Most people go from Zach to Mo and then say, oh, this isn't going to change. Whoa, that looks, let me just go back here, right? The percentage of people that don't like conflict, what is that? And 70 percentile, right? So as I get to Mo, I just let me just stay in my lane, go back over here. We've got to instill confidence within your team members that it's okay to go past Mo. And actually between Mo and Todd is where they're going to be able to solve their own problem. They're going to be able to, we're going to use the dialogue, right, this is engagement, right? The dialogue that's between these two, Mo and Todd, is going to be used, then regurgitate back to them to be able to develop solutions, right? To be able to develop processes that ultimately were their idea, right? Because they're the ones that provided the information or the specific dialogue between these two, and then it instills confidence within them that says, when I get into this zone, my voice is going to be heard, somebody's going to listen, and I hold what's necessary to be able to get us back to the other end. And this is a muscle. This is not something that you can go back and say, all right, guys, we're going to try this, right? How do muscles get big, strong, and sexy, right? It's gym, right? It's compounded time. It's compounded interest. So this between the two, Todd and Mo, is the muscle that you want to remain, right? If they need to recognize when I'm at Todd and I'm getting past Todd, once they recognize they have the skill set to bring it back inside the Mo and Todd, right, between these two, they glow. They radiate confidence, right? And then naturally, process development, all of a sudden you have momentum. And once that momentum is rolling, ball's going, right? As long as you don't let it stop and you keep that attention there, it goes quick. Everybody grasp that? Makes sense? Thanks, guys.
So what's interesting about this process is as you're developing it, and Drew and I had some fun with this with his people, but we were basically setting production standards, and then the job of the administrative side of the business was to monitor performance. I know you've all heard this old cliche before, but you cannot manage what you don't measure. So we've got to measure as we institute these processes, how are we measuring them so that we can sit down once or twice a week and say, we're making progress or we're not. So Drew, setting those production standards, how'd you do it?
So the efficiency of our team members, all the way from the technicians through the administration team, we measured what those efficiencies were between clear, measurable, relevant, and most importantly, attainable metrics. We spent a lot of time, I spent a lot of time, having a hard time determining what metrics to use. What were the best metrics for the individual? Can anybody guess where we ended up finding those metrics that work best? The portal, exactly. So not overcomplicated. Just pull the numbers directly out of the portal. We assigned those to whoever was relatively responsible for that particular department or that area, put them on a board, and began to track them. Beyond holding them accountable to those metrics, we had a very disciplined meeting schedule. So our meeting schedule is going to consist of our morning administration meeting, production meeting in the afternoon. We have a sales projection meeting twice weekly. Monday, it's to confirm, and production manager is responsible for bringing forward a projection for the week to give everybody their targets. Anybody responsible for any variables associated with those deliveries is in the room at that time, and they're held accountable to provide feedback as to what potentially their department is going to hold them back on. Therefore, here are the 15, 16 cars that we're delivering this week. Here's our projected sales of X. When we get to that vehicle, the parts manager knows his responsibility is to define anything that's potentially on back order, anything that potentially is going to be a hurdle in his world, and everybody on Monday morning is aware of that. Once that assignment is done and concluded, the meeting is had again on Thursday, where we recap to confirm that we're on track for the week. The cars that should have left already have left. The cars that haven't left, why, and are they still on schedule to leave for the end of the week? And then Thursday's a little different. We will round off with what is next Monday looking like. So we're already thinking about the following week on that Monday morning. Beyond those structured meetings, ARs were something that got out of hand for a while. That's become a weekly meeting. So we have a definitive time where we spend a half hour a week reviewing ARs with accounts payable and determining why they're there. Why is this consecutive weeks that we're talking about it? What decisions are being made? Are we turning it over to litigation? Are we going to give them time? We provide them financing, whatever. How do we even end up in a circumstance where it ended up on ARs in the first place? Mm-hmm. Those are structured meetings. And then most importantly, SOP review and training are both scheduled, which is something that we'll get to a little bit later. But I think that's a very integral part of process development and or implementation of process, is setting aside time almost for processes or to problem solve on things that you haven't definitively determined are a problem yet. But your record keeping throughout the week allows for a productive meeting as long as you've allotted time for it.
And the ARs, accounts receivable, you have to make the effort to have that meeting at least once a week and clear what you can. You should be in a cycle of every 15 working days being able to clear those accounts. That's your money that somebody else has. So we've got to do a good job with that. So first impressions and personality-driven communication. Before Drew goes into this one, this is one of the things that his team does extremely well. And so let's let him talk about that, and then we'll kind of circle back to talk about a little bit more after he gets done.
By a show of hands, how many in here start off a new team member with a formal orientation? Okay. I think overall, not only us as an automotive industry, but in general, businesses severely underestimate the importance of a first impression, especially on a new team member coming in. Personally, I think that it's just as important, if not more important, than your first impression on a client. Statistically, and I read some of this stuff on the plane ride over, 46% of new hires fail. 26% is because they can't take constructive feedback. That's where that conflict resolution comes in, right? So that exercise we just did, that specifically, we already know that people have, they're vulnerable in this stage. So if initially we're starting off taking that into consideration, it just, you make for a more positive outcome. 23% are unable to manage their emotions. That conflict again, right? Giving them that resource, developing that muscle. 59% of people that are hired claim that their orientation wasn't that it wasn't good, it was non-existent. There was no orientation. 62% leave within 6 to 12 months. And 50% leave before the end of 2 years. So one of the things that I did at Panera, I did all the company orientation. So this is a very, although it's been several years, very common scenario where I would speak to a room of people responsible, and I had everybody from the baker to general managers to district managers to front cashiers. And every Saturday morning in a hotel room, I would give company orientation on, Panera's missions, Panera's philosophies. And I think watching, for me, the people that would come into that room and how passionate I was about the brand, watching them grow through the company, it was almost like I had a piece when I had a regular person come in as a cashier, and then next thing I'd go visit her store and she's being considered for a shift supervisor. For me, that was some self-gratification to kind of circle back. And it was just always something that was very important when we were initially building the initial foundation of the business, if you will. At the end of the day, it's clarity of your expectation. What is it that you expect from that team member, and without assumption that they already understand or they know. When I talk about a structured orientation or a structured onboarding, when we begin, it's with an employee, it's an introduction to their responsibilities. It's a written, defined facility tour. It is not just, hey, this is Javier, and Javier is going to walk you through. Javier is following a script, and it's written to him definitively what his responsibilities are to communicate to that team member for that day under this time frame, and nothing more. Nothing less, but nothing more. And it's going to include things associated with our policy for our front office. What a customer is to us, and we'll say things like, look, if you need something and you got to come to the front office, if there's a customer in there, we don't care if a car is on fire in the back. That's why we've got fire extinguishers. You allow the front office staff to deal with a customer. We don't want somebody rushing in to build or bring any stress or any negativity to that environment. So it's a very controlled environment, definitive from the beginning. Workspace introduction, job descriptions, departmental specific checklists, preventative maintenance responsibilities, et cetera. All of these things are encompassed inside of a packet for orientation that is not just handed to a team member and say, here, Keith, we're going to hold you responsible to inconsistently, because now I've got, this team member is what Keith's perception of the company is, which I hope would be in line with what our culture would be portraying, but it's very integral that it's a written script specifically on what you want that team member to view and or see their position. Every role within your shop needs to be communicated with uber clarity and speak to the specifics of why that team member is an integral part of your operation. My father beats in my head over and over again. He's a very process-minded individual. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I guess. But he says there's 2 reasons why somebody doesn't do anything. Anybody give them what they are? I said that wrong. 2 reasons why somebody doesn't do what we expect them of or what we want them to do.
We don't check up on it.
So 1, they don't care. And 2, we didn't communicate with clarity what our expectation was. So if you've ruled out and or you believe you have team members that care, then the only other place to look is what you've communicated to them as far as what their expectations should be.
And another shameless plug, what Drew's talking about, we cover in our production class. If you have 2 days that you can spend in that class, we go through the 6 steps on how to communicate things to your folks. And then, importantly, somebody said it, the follow-up. You've got to do the follow-up processes. So these 3 areas, Drew, these were really important. How did these changes, I mean, you changed. Now you had to get your team to change. What was difficult about that?
Sure. Man, every time I look back at these pictures, I go, God, do I really look that old? Initially, I think the most difficult change was just developing the team itself, right? Defining, who did what and when. How many in the room, show of hands, wear more than one hat within your shop? Leave them up. Leave them up. How about more than 3? More than 6? Okay, we still got hands in the air. So, some of you do even know how many hats you're wearing. For me, it was the most challenging thing, but it was the pivotal. I remember it was just the turning point, right? We sat down, developed an organizational chart, and put my name on all the positions we were filling, and that was a setback, right? More importantly, although we try to stay humble, right? I thought that I was just doing an extraordinary job at all of them. And until I saw it on paper and then recognized it was completely the opposite, right? Physically, it was impossible to be able to do at the level that I wanted to do for my staff, more importantly for the business. But, I was a jack of all and a master of none. And I was so far in the trench that I couldn't even see it. I didn't recognize it.
So Drew, real quick.
Yeah.
How good were you at delegating?
Yeah, it was tough to turn things over, right? And I'm sure many of you can relate, right? Your confidence within yourself and your ability just drives something within you that says, I just want to get it done, right? And I'll just do it myself. And obviously personality dependent, some are going to be stronger than others, but it was tough. This is my baby, right? I started this and we grinded it out from the beginning, so it was tough to turn over those responsibilities. When we did this, we just prioritized building the team associated with the areas that I was doing my worst at. Where was the areas that I was spending a lot of time, but the results could have been better. And then that's how we prioritized who the next hire was, what area, what department we needed to bring in next. And although going into this several times, it was very broad, and I not that I was confused, but I was just lost at going, are we going the right route? Are we going the right route? How can I afford to hire this person? And every time we made a hire, the only thought that came to mind was, why didn't I do this 6 months ago? And whether it was sarcasm or what it was, Keith would always follow with, well, I did say this to you 6 months ago. But nonetheless, that was the only real true feeling, right? And now when I look at it, that organizational chart, it's still in play today, right? It still plays. I just interviewed a team member last week. I did his annual review, and he wasn't, when we were asking the questions specifically. I do a review where there's a series of questions where my employee will give me feedback on how he believes or she believes she's doing within the position, and then I, as the shop owner, answer the same questions to communicate maybe if there's a cross conflict within, you're not doing as well as you think you're doing, and here's why or whatnot. It really creates for a good constructive dialogue. But in that conversation last week, within his department of triage or blueprinting, it wasn't clearly, there's 5 people within that department now. It wasn't clear to him who his team lead was. And I was shocked at that. So I broke out his chart and I explained to him the chain of command, and and help them kind of communicate within. It's amazing the efficiency that you can create as long as you can clarify to the team member who they are bringing their, Eric spoke on it yesterday in his roundtable, where, if it got to me, it was free, and that was something that he implemented as a director. Are you the easy button, right? This is how you avoid being that easy button, is when they're coming in for that, and they've got that problem, you're defining to them how many people should have taken care of that problem before it got to you.
So the culture shift for your leaders, it was impressive. How long did it take you to actually get them to commit? Because one thing Drew just said that I think is really important, he called the business his baby, okay? And to most of us, that's what it is. But how disciplined are we with our babies? Sometimes maybe not as much as we need to be. So you've got to get other people that are involved in helping you run the business. So with that being said, what were some of the difficult aspects of maintaining this culture relationship for your leaders?
So as far as the time to put all this together, I don't think there is a definitive time where we can say, we're done, we're there, right? This is a never-ending pursuit of improvement. It's just constantly, we're looking to update, we're looking to grow, we're looking to become better. Not necessarily from a sales perspective, that's the byproduct of it, I think. I think that it's, better communicators, a better environment, we're all dedicated to personal growth. It becomes this interdependence to where everybody's working on each other, right? It's within those, that pursuit of development, it's not only trying to hit the targets, right? We've aligned their incentives with their targets. So, and the incentives for the individual team member is specific to whatever they're going to be, their personality is going to respond best to, right? That the work's been put in. So they're not trying to hit targets, they're trying to exceed them, right? So to take a second and speak on Ricky here. Rick's my production manager. I speak a lot to vendors. I believe that vendors have resources that we don't. They have the ability to be out in the fields, and they're seeing what's happening in different stores, and sometimes we can have blinders on by being so, once again, in the trenches. But I'm very open to my vendors on what I'm looking for, what I need, what my current needs are. And, briefly, Rick and I's relationship was initiated off of me expressing to my Axalta rep, which is my paint line, on the need of somebody to be able to be, at the time, second in command, or it was ultimately a production manager, somebody that could help me run the shop. The shop environment spoke for itself. The guy had a lot of confidence. Well, one day I got a phone call and he says, Drew, I'm in Ohio training, and there's this guy here that he's from the BVI. He's here on the paint company has sent him to train, and he's just different, man. He seems like he would get in line, you guys would click. I said, what do you mean by different? Well, everybody else is going out to the bar and getting smashed. This guy's at the Walmart trying to find a toy for his children, and he's on the phone. He's reading his book. He was in the front row every day. He just had something about him being different. So I said, get his number. I got his number. I called him. And ultimately, he originally from Guyana. He went to the BVI, wanted to be in the States. And I remember, I'll never forget. I was sitting in my hot tub one night, and I'm talking to Rick on the phone. And it's probably the second time that I've spoken to this man. And we're kind of walking through a world of what if you were to come? What does that look like? Long story short, Rick dropped out of school in the 4th grade. He came here, $280 a week is what he was making. That was 5 years ago. Currently, he owns 2 houses, drives a brand new Range Rover to work, and he's just putting both of his kids through college as of last week. For me, that's it, man. That guy came in, he's done every position within my shop. He was the painter at one time, he was the structural technician at one time. He is firsthand, frontline, and the amount of respect that the staff gives him as a production manager, even with, like I said, 4th grade education, this guy kills it. When it comes to targets, and I kind of gave this away a little bit ago. Our current target is 59 grand. Keith, that's what Keith's got set. When Rick is coming in for the production meetings, he initially at the beginning of the year, he's giving me these projections, and I'm going, Rick, this is a little overzealous. And you say that we're going to deliver 80 grand, you're going to deliver 90 grand this week, really? And he's like, let's have a conversation at the end of the week if I don't do it. I'll be damned. There it is. Next week, there it is. So that 59 target, right, he's got the tools, the resources, more importantly, that conflict, right? And he has the confidence within that if he ends up in an area where he can't, maybe he's tried to implement that on his own, right? He'll reach out to help, whether it's me or another team member, to say, look, I'm trying with these guys, and they're just not getting there. He circles back. And right now, I'll be damned if he's not averaging 82 a year since the beginning of the year. And I couldn't be more proud of that. Who can tell me quickly, what are some of the obstacles that your team members deal with within your stores? Obstacles, hurdles. What's holding them back from being able to maintain the efficiency that you want? Parts availability. What else? Space, limited on space. I can relate. I'm climbing the walls in my shop right now. Communication. Okay. Lack of communication. Lack of confidence, personal insecurities, right? I panic when I get into this zone, right? What's going on with this conflict? Whoa, I don't want any part of that, right? They're not going to listen anyway, right? My voice doesn't matter, right? Anybody else? Proper training, lack of proper training, okay, training's there. So we focused intently on removing those restrictions. Any obstacles, any hurdles, anything that is slowing your team down needs to be recorded, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. You need to write it down in a systematic way and then utilize it to best improve moving forward. Any waste, right? In my world, probably you guys can relate, the biggest time waster is transition. Transition time is huge. When they're moving from one RO to the next, communication bottlenecks, right? Material shortages. So real brief, and then we're going out of time. Something interesting. So when I talk about vendors and I talk about relationships and I talk about resources, right? I had a good relationship with my 3M rep, buying all the sandpaper, adhesives, epoxies, etc. He invited me to a regional training meeting, and it was at an Omni in Orlando, and he wanted me to just come and give a presentation or speak to them on firsthand of the automotive industry and what he was doing for me and what more importantly we needed from them. And I went and I entertained it. And when I got there, it was 200 plus people in the room. I talked for an hour. I got done, shook everybody's hand. They said thanks for my time, and I left. A few weeks later, I was home and I got a box in the mail from 3M. I opened it up, and oddly, it was just a big box of a bunch of different 3M products. I mean, Post-it notes, sponges, all kinds of gloves, Tegaderms, like in surgery, gauze, all kinds of random products that 3M makes. And when I looked at it all, I said, these people, think about the resources that these people have. And these guys are in my store every day. The vendors that are coming there, are you looking at the vendors, outside salespeople, as an interruption to your day? Or is it an opportunity, right, to be able to utilize their network, their resources? So that being said, when I considered it, I called the rep back and I said, hey, remember when I came and spoke for you? And without hesitation, I said, sure, no problem. Well, I need a favor. I want to cash one in. I've got a problem with material. And one of those hurdles or obstacles that we were dealing with was material shortages. Through a systematic way of recording what was those projection meetings, every Monday and Thursday, what was holding that car back? Oh, well, we needed 6 tubes of seam sealer and we only had 4 on hand. we had to order 2. No, but they're here now, Drew. And it was irrelevant because it was going to prevent the car from leaving. And time again, material kept coming up. So I sat down with 3M and I said, look, Scott, this is where I'm at. Here's my hurdles. Every week, it's not a massive amount. It's not that we're running out of paint, right? But we've got to be more systematic with the way that we're maintaining our inventory. What are our current PARs? I want my vendor to hold the inventory. I want my distributor to hold that money. I don't want to have a massive amount of inventory. But I need to determine, coming from the restaurant world, is there an automated way to be able to define how much oil, how much of cavity wax, how much of whatever the particular product was that my current usage on hand, and can I automate that delivery or that order? And he said, sure, I'll get you in hand with the right people. And I started speaking to a couple people that they sent to me from overseas. There was a few software developers that were talking. They sent a team in, and for a solid 6 months, I had 3M in the shop twice a week. And they developed an inventory management system off of iPhone scanners that we were scanning the product. It was automatically communicating with our management system, adding it to our estimate. So we were getting recovery for that product now. Nothing was falling through the cracks. Most importantly, my issue with ordering and missing that product was now automated. Nobody was responsible for placing an order within the shop. We were relying on, as Jimmy was mentioning, that technology to be able to say, as soon as, if my expectation or my PAR is to have 2 boxes of 320 grit sandpaper, every sheet of sandpaper, they've got a barcode next to their cart, they would scan and say, I'm using 3 pieces for this job. Those 3 pieces go directly toward my bill and or to the estimate. I made sure that I'm getting recovery. And as that number dropped below 50 pieces, I know I've got less than a box. Automatically, the vendor gets an email to send 2 more boxes. That entire solution was developed off of sitting down with my account rep and saying, look, this is a problem, and it's in your best interest to help me solve it, because ultimately, if you want me to continue to buy your $80 box of sandpaper when the guys come and knock on my back door to sell it to me for $22, right? I need a solution in order to get paid, compensated for it, right? And make sure that I don't run out of it so I can increase my car count, maintain that efficiency. I just spoke to the rep last week. They rolled it out last Wednesday. He said 612 stores within the collision shops already, and they are just ramping up with it. So, for me, less about, although I'm intrigued by, okay, we're positively impacting others as far as 3M, the goal, the mission there, utilize the vendors. Don't look at your vendor. Don't look at your cell. Make intentional time to meet with them, right? And have structured time within your schedule. When they're walking in, if your team, your manager, you are going, oh, this guy again, he's going to take up 45 minutes of my day. Or are you going, listen, John, with all due respect, I got a big day today, but I do have some things that I want to go over with you. Is there any way that we can schedule something on next Thursday for a half hour? Sure. That guy's doing anything but just driving around looking for opportunity. And you sit him down in the room and you go, here's what you could do for me. Less about what I can do for you. And it becomes a mutual, right? When you work with them on that level, the sky's the limit.
One thing I want to go back to Ricky real quick. The biggest thing for Ricky was building up his confidence. And so what I did, Drew and I talked about, I said, do you mind if I give Ricky a call? And we went probably, I don't know, that was probably 4 or 5 months, right?
Yeah.
That I was calling him at least once a week, just kind of, where are you at on your projections? Are you meeting him? And it started to build his confidence because every time I talked to him was, hey, you just went up a little bit more. You went up a little bit more. And now he's got the confidence. He had a real problem with telling the folks that work for him, you got to fix this problem. But now he doesn't have that anymore. So it was a long process, but he's like a sponge. And once you get it into his head that he can do it, no problem.
Real quick, Keith, before you go, to speak on these fundamentals real quick. So fundamentals are something that I heard mentioned in another round table, but it was tough for me to wrap my mind around. And eventually, instead of creating them, honestly, I just stole ATIs. So I've taken the ATI fundamentals, rebranded them. I got permission from Keith to do it. Put my logo on them. And now wherever it's relative toward that particular fundamental, it hangs in that department. So this is Rick's production area, and be performance driven hangs there to where when we kind of have those gray moments of like, I'll just read something off that fundamental that will kind of draw them all back in, right? Rick in the beginning phases was big on over-promising and under-delivering. From a customer service environment, he wanted to, yes, he was a yes man, yes, yes, yes. So right above his desk, I mean just as big, right above his desk, right where he picks up the phone, honor commitments, right? And before he goes to make a phone call to a customer, I'll say to him from time to time, read your fundamental before you give him a call. Before you get on the phone and say, yes, ma'am, no problem, yes, ma'am, I can do it, and ultimately fall short, right?
So when you're implementing your production standards for your store, getting the team's buy-in is a big part of this. How'd you make that happen?
All right, so departmental clarity once again. Daily closeout and or RO specific. So right here is what I'm referring to, this signage here. Daily closeout responsibilities and daily or RO specific responsibilities per job. Those are posted in every department. They're not in a binder, they're not in my computer. Well, they are, in both of those areas. The binder stays on our conference table. The digital version is in a shareable file that the entire team can reference. So there's no excuse to say I don't have a copy, etc. But I'll give you a funny story on this real brief. As these stand within the departments on each wall, they're used as a constant reference, right? It allows Rick to walk into a department and say, where are we at? Well, hold on. How are we there if you haven't done 3 yet? How are we on 6? All right, and we go back to it. So it helps them, that's another tool that keeps everybody accountable. I remember hiring my body technician, current, about 5 years ago now, and referred to me by a tool vendor, right? He said, listen, you got to see this place. I think you're not happy with where you're at. Come in and talking to me. The guy spoke. We ended up hiring him. And we were standing in his department, and this is probably before real structure orientation, right? Introductions, right? But it wasn't as scripted as it is today. And John and I are standing here, and we're looking over, and he's going, yeah, man, I think I'm good. I'm set. All that I need to know is, what you expect of me per job, and we'll be in good shape. And I remember looking at it, I said, I think you and I are going to get along just right. I said, right behind you is what I expect on every job. If you can follow this systematically per car, you're not going to have any issues with Rick. The cars are going to be consistent, right? And they're going to flow through. Closing responsibilities. I mean, it goes as definitive as saying, turn the fans off in your shop. Make sure the radio is off in your shop. And it gives them the tools, once again, to walk in, and they'll say, oh, well, the booth was left on last night, or there's a rat that ate, rat got in and ate this or whatever. And it allows us to have the response of, how is that possible? Because if we're following the process of daily closeout responsibilities, and that expectation is set, how are we allowing these silly things to impact our morning? It's now 8:30 and you're just getting started because you've had this hurdle in the morning due to somebody not holding you accountable for a closing list. The checklist. We've digitized essentially checkpoints. So the car cannot advance through our process and or to the next phase of production without meeting minimum requirements. Sometimes those requirements are going to be mandated photos, right? There's a lot of litigation in my world. Last year's 362 lawsuits filed. I haven't lost one yet, knock on wood, right? Not one. Every single lawsuit that we went to court on, we won. And it was because of these digital checklists, right? Mandated photos. I don't go in, I don't have to look at a file at the end and say, what is my insurance company not paying? Oh, they're short paying $1,600. The consumer doesn't want to pay out of pocket. Okay, let's get the attorney involved. I don't have to go, well, hold on. Let me go review the file and determine if this is the file that we actually want to go stand up in court. I can say within seconds, absolutely, file on it. Because I know I'm going to have documentation of applying corrosion protection to the vehicle. It's a mandated photo. There's no way I deliver the car without them not having that photo there. I know that I'm going to be able to, I'm going to have documented photos of primer application, documented photos of masking, procedures that are typically overlooked in my world and or not reimbursed for. You know, as far as keeping the buy-in, right, top right, I'm referring to for symbolic training. So I played a lot of sports growing up. ICAR was kind of developing a reputation for mundane, or really wasn't learning anything, right? Something as simple as we started making banners, putting their names on them, hanging them up within the shop, and they're just bleeding pride, right? Peer-to-peer, our apprenticeship programs and the onboarding of them was just rapid, right? The buy-in toward it was great. We want to share with them what my staff thought of you during implementation of all this?
Sure.
Okay. So anybody guess in the room real quick what you believe I am on the bird test? Eagle, secondary. So my primary is peacock, right? So it matters to me greatly what you all think of me today, right? So don't beat me up on the survey. But nonetheless, thank you. Nonetheless, anything that was potentially negatively looked upon, totally Keith's idea. I had nothing to do with it. So when we're implementing an employee manual, updating standards, right, within operations, I remember multiple times going, that's great, Keith, and that's exactly what I want. I'm not delivering that message. So we scheduled a meeting. I bring the team into the office, and Keith would get on Zoom and go, look, the way it is, and I'm at the desk going, I know, guys, I know. And it worked. It was a good cop, bad cop dynamic, and ultimately, to this day, we've been able to establish that, right? If I've got something that I want to get through, potentially to even Rick's level, and I don't want to ruin any or maybe hinder any relationship there or affect his judgment of me, he knows I'm going to push him, but I want to keep it in a positive tone, I'll go to Keith and go, Keith, here's the problem. This is what I really need to be doing. And then I go outside and go, man, Keith wants to talk to you, man. You got to go sit down.
It's pretty effective.
So this is just an example of the organization as far as the onboarding and the packets associated with each individual position. All team members have access. They can't edit this stuff, but they can reference it on a regular basis. So our onboarding, this is just the detailer's position. We have those for all positions within the computer. This is really important, and this is just an example. This is Microsoft To Do, and whether you use it or a different program, I could care less, but the point is you have to develop a systematic way of recording the conflict. What I use this, my mind goes on for days, but I can share these lists. So for instance, if I can make departmental list, I can share it with who I choose, and I share it with my production manager. I'll share it with quality assurance. I'll share it with front office, whoever is relative or responsible for that department. And as I walk in, instead of interrupting production for the day, instead of walking into that and saying, whoa, what's going on, and then further negatively impacting efficiency, I'll just make a note to myself of whatever it was that I didn't like or that I've seen a few times, right? And then we have I know confidently, so does the staff, that we have a specifically structured training and or SOP review meeting where whatever the topic would be, off of this systematic list, we'll sit in the office and say, okay, continually, we're having a hard time with managing office transactions on Fridays. We're having a hard time with getting the vendor to deliver, whatever it may be. And then, so my right brain thinking when I walk in is just recorded under confidence that I'm going to intently schedule time to review later, and now I get the members responsible for strengthening that muscle to be in the room, and we all have the opportunity to systematically run through and apply left brain thinking. What is the solution to this problem? How do we not have this conversation? And if we don't develop a solution right away, it may be something we would sit down in 2 more weeks and say, all right, we promised each other this, and here we are again. So that didn't work. Okay, what are we going to try this week? And that's how all of these processes were implemented. These lists have been, initially were reprinted again and again. And they go, Drew, you're going to keep printing signs? I'm going to keep printing signs.
So tell us about the new normal with your leadership team, because I know we had some struggles initially, but it's become the well-oiled machine. Tell us about how that went.
Yeah, so, I think from the admin team down, they just bleed with pride. This is our other feature last April. Real brief on Travis. Travis came to me, hired as a body technician. He had a big greasy beard, big long hair, looked like he hadn't showered in a week. Great kid. He was an eagle, off the chart eagle. Looked like he was going to be a good negotiator. And I basically said, here's a razor, and you need to go get a haircut. Here's here's a dry clean shirt, right? Well, I can't afford to dry clean my shirt. Okay, we're going to dry clean them for you. I've got to logistically get down there to pick them up. They're going to pick them up for you, and they're going to deliver them in the office, right? So once again, those hurdles, the excuses, no more, right? Because I knew what I wanted at the front counter. He became frontline negotiator. Fender Bender got a hold of it. Title became damage analysis expert. And then he went to the fences with it. So, they did a centerfold on him. Best, most improved 2018 ATI. The front office is top notch, right? These people, it's that personal growth. It's the goals. It's the image, right? Everywhere you go to I got 6 bathrooms in my shop, and in front of every single toilet, there is a sign of the image fundamental. Every single toilet. So when you get up and you tuck your shirt in, I just want you to, just like employees must wash your hands, right? Image is important to us, and that's communicated every time you go to the restroom. Go ahead.
So tell us about some of the feedback you got, because I think this was pretty interesting.
So our production meetings initially, when we first started them, we were trying to hold individual team members accountable. So we would say, okay, John, what are you getting us out of body today? Abe, what are you giving us out of paint? And there was too much emotion. So we've basically just taken the exact same questions and we changed the verbiage a little bit and ultimately ended up with something that this is the dialogue of our afternoon production meeting. And it's always looking upstream. It's always looking to determine what we could have done differently, right? Always considering the team members' viewpoints. And this is the script that they follow every day at 1 o'clock. What vehicles must be painted today? That's, what am I getting from you today, Abe? But they don't receive it as emotional as, when you're going to them directly, I got a lot of, I'm going to do my best, boss. We're trying. We're going to keep trying. And now we're focusing on, instead of the individual, the RO, are these things going to happen? Are there any express jobs on the lot right now that we need to be concerned with? Vehicles that are being delivered today? Vehicles being painted tomorrow? Any problems or delays that we can think of, and what are we doing about it? So that the team, are they engaged, right? Are they actively engaged in what's going on within the day? And then that feedback was crucial moving forward. Go ahead.
So what are some of the peripheral, it's not just the specific things, but this really broadens out to the entire shop. What are some of the peripheral things that you went through, or what happened as a result of the implementation?
Watching the KPIs closely, tracking those metrics, it allowed us to invest in more equipment, right? Accountants calling saying, Drew, you got to spend some money. So we brought in ADAS, we brought in alignments, increased our cycle time, increased our car count. We brought in 3-dimensional measuring. Materials, the specifics, we weren't concerned with the $20 box sandpaper, right? Because of the processing allowing us to get compensated for the material, the price no longer really mattered to us, right? So therefore, we were buying the best that we possibly could. The booth itself, through regularly recording those hurdles and those conflicts, we knew that what was holding us up within the paint department was masking. The car was going in the booth, and the booth was not running because we were having to mask the car in the booth. So that feedback over time, we gave to the booth manufacturer so that they provided us a solution that says, okay, in a side load booth, you can completely mask this car while the booth is running, And then once this car comes out, the door goes up and you roll the car in on dollies to where we eliminated the downtime in the booth. That decision to make a $250,000 purchase was thrived off of our systematic recording of what was holding us up in the paint area.
So tell us a little bit about, now that you've been doing this for some time with this framework, tell us about your production results.
So currently, as I was discussing, 59,000 target, Rick's over 80 now. The 17 members on the team total today. 11 of them are cross-trained amongst multiple departments, 9 of which are administration. Levels of production and/or targets that were once considered impossible, they're not even blinking an eye at anymore.
With your culture, tell us a little bit about, are you experiencing any turnover?
So no turnover. The new staff, bringing them in, we've got a structured apprenticeship program, 6-month program. We supply tools. The feedback and the results are given back to the tech schools. Biggest thing that I noticed here with the tech schools is when I went out to visit the schools, I recognized that they had an abundance of funding. There was companies donating all kinds of equipment to them. And believe it or not, at my high school that I graduated from, I went to visit for the second time, they have the three-dimensional measuring system that I use in my store to measure every single car that comes into my triage bay is a $30,000 piece of equipment. The teacher didn't even know how to turn it on. So when I was exposed to that, I immediately got on the phone with my vendors, once again, right, brought those relations in and said, look, I need to get this thing updated. These people need to know how to do it. We don't need to be working with stud welders. I got 86 cars on a lot. Not one of them needs a stud welder, but they're all needing to be measured. Let's work on changing the curriculum for these children so that as they're going through it, I've got kids that are potentially graduating from these schools with the intel and ability to be able to triage a vehicle right out of high school.
Have they given you any negative feedback?
Yeah, most of that was personality specific, and we just utilized the tools to best guide them and work towards the with them.
Tell us about bringing on new staff.
And that's back to the orientations. It's structured, it's systematic. It's got to be presented under process.
Well, we're kind of burning our time, but
Yep.
Let's just jump through these real quick.
Sure. So I think the biggest takeaway here is going to be your front office. Anybody in here, as far as capture percentage, are you actively tracking capture percentage? Your front door. What we noticed is as we increased the reputation and we had a 5-star reputation driving people in the front door, we were burning a lot of time on people that were not our target customer. So the way that we did it was break down who our target customer was through customer avatars, what their objections were, what their pain points were, and we developed 5 or 6 to be able to get our front office staff to just determine who this customer was that was standing in front of us. Instead of just customer sell, it's customer, right? Are they our target customer, right? Are they willing to pay a premium for good service, whatnot? And if they weren't, we have a written process on escorting them to who we would refer, right? And making sure that we're still controlling maybe somebody offended by saying, we couldn't work for them, or we weren't good enough to work for them.
Would you have done anything differently?
Most definitely. So I think initially I would probably respected the personality screening and coaching much more earlier in the journey. Implemented the checklist and the checkpoints much sooner. That was the key to our consistency. There was a lot of time, been more disciplined with my coach calls, right? Make your coach work for you. Make them push you. Make them challenge you. There was a lot of time where we were talking about whatever was in the room, whatever I just walked out, whatever argument I just walked out of, I would go and we'd share it for 45 minutes, and I'd get done with the call and I'd go, what did I really bring it into the next week? So by systematically recording throughout the week, I've got one of my lists that we reviewed earlier. It says coach call. So all week long I'm writing dialogue. So when I sit down with my coach, I'm going, here's my areas that I need to be focused on. And finally, just to end the morning on my end, if you don't take anything away from today as far as process is concerned, my advice to you would be to start to embrace conflict as an opportunity for process development. Through empowering your team on working through healthy conflict resolution. And in terms of good old Keith Manich, all that you're doing relative to process, keep it consistent, ensure that it's repeatable, and maintain the discipline to do it every day.
All right, folks, we're out of time.